So, we're going to discuss the feminine principle. The feminine principle is the most magnetic, energetic, and prophetic force that permeates our universe. So, what is the feminine principle? The feminine principle refers to a set of qualities, attributes, or values that are traditionally associated with femininity or the archetype of the feminine in various cultural, spiritual, or philosophical contexts. These attributes are often considered complementary to the masculine principle, and the two are seen as part of a broader duality that exists within nature, society, and the human experience. So I like to break the feminine principle down into three components of being magnetic, being energetic, and being prophetic. And we're going to go through each of those components and I'll show you what I mean by that and how not only do women come to understand the feminine principle within themselves, but also how we as gender nuanced people become conscious and aware of the feminine principle within our variegated expressions of gender. The feminine principle is magnetic. So, the creator, we would say God is love, right? And the creator separated the heavens and the earth. So, that right there is the principle of correspondence, where the heaven is associated with the masculine principle and the earth is associated with the feminine principle. So you could ultimately say that the creator is conscious. So the division and the separation of the heaven and the earth is actually dividing the components of consciousness into masculine and feminine components, respectively. And it is ultimately the division of this consciousness that leads to attraction within men and women. So your other half, right? Man said that he had found his other half. It would be a woman who would be the most yin, right? That it is ultimately the expression of femininity, the way that you think, the way who you are as a gender nuanced person, as a galleta, that attracts gender nuanced men that have a masculine internal essence. So there we see how the feminine principle has a magnetic quality to it. Alrighty, so the second portion. The feminine principle is energetic. The power within is being the most yin. So, since Earth is a mother, and because of the way that we touch Earth, our bodies are magnetized and animated with a degree of femininity. So, that is ultimately how the feminine principle emerges and shows up in our experiences as gender nuanced people and for women. So, in Judith Butler's book, Gender Trouble, she has a really great definition for gender. She says that the view that gender is performative sought to show that what we take to be an internal essence of gender is a manufactured through a sustained set of acts posited through the gendered stylization of the body. So, using gender nuanced people as an example. So, a gender nuanced man, although he may have a degree of femininity, he has ultimately a masculine internal essence. And that as a gender nuanced man, he becomes aware of his gender nuanced components by his stylized acts, by the way that he performs his gender. Also, Carl Jung discussed a lot about the anima in man and how within men there is an anima. And I would say that for gender nuanced men and galletas, that it is our expression of femininity that is the anima in man. More specifically for galletas. So you would have a gender nuanced man that has a masculine internal essence, and it would be the feminine gendered core in galletas that is the anima in man that a gender nuanced man is ultimately attracted to. Another thing I would like to note is that, just using myself as an example, I understand myself to not be attracted to women because of the way that I touch earth. Going back to our first example, if we understand how we're magnetized that way. That because we are magnetized the same way as people, I wouldn't necessarily be attracted to women. This also shows how for us in from with even within an archetypal perspective that we fundamentally understand that men have to then land and touch earth if they are attracted to us the way that a bee would be attracted to a flower. And the final component is prophetic, that the feminine principle is prophetic. So the feminine principle, it evolves, right? That the way you think about it is that Earth is a mother, right? And the Creator has designed this sacred field of life for us to grow. So, in terms of yin and yang, growth is masculine, but growth over time, that is feminine. Growth over time is evolution. Let me give you an example. So, for women, there was a time period where you may have had, smaller boobs, right? And then you ended up with bigger boobs. You remember those that change over time. Also, when it comes to the menstrual cycle, there was a time where that had started in your body, and how that creates this understanding that there is a period of time. There's a window of opportunity. I'm getting ahead of myself, but how there's a window of opportunity for you to then look to the future, because that's ultimately what the feminine principle does. It looks to the future, and women look to what they have to do in the future. So, going back to femininity being evolution, I also wanted to explain how that emerges within our experience as gender nuanced people. That for us as gender nuanced people, there was a time where we came to an awareness of our gender. And usually for gender nuanced people, it's usually because of homophobia. So, there were times, like for example, as a kid, where you would get yelled at and told to get your hands off your hips and stop walking like that, before we had any conscious understanding of why we were being told that. Especially for people who kind of fall in the middle and who don't necessarily have a whole lot of and feminine characteristics on the outside. Like, you weren't, as a kid, you weren't wearing makeup, you weren't wearing lipstick, so you're being yelled at about something, or you're getting in trouble, as Gender Judith Butler would say, for something that you at that age are not consciously aware of. So we learn and we become aware of our gender over time, and we have to grow into our gender. Gender is ultimately becoming. Also, I say that the feminine principle is prophetic because it is the alpha and the omega. It is the beginning and the ending and everything in between. So, the first beginning that we have, that we are confronted with in our lives, is the void of the womb, right? The darkness of the womb. And then when we begin to confront our mortalities, it would be, once we cross over and transition, death would then be the final yin. So, the feminine is of the void, right? This void is the alpha and the omega. And growth over time and how we live our lives from a natalist perspective is ultimately feminine as well, because we are designed to grow as beings. So, although we live in a masculine signifying economy, ultimately the experiences that we have here within the sacred field of life are imbued with a degree of femininity to help us grow and to live out our lives wholly and fully.